It was Christmas Eve when my son looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mum, the house is too full. You should get a motel." That's how the night began. No sugarcoating, no pretense. Just a cold line that sliced through the warmth of holiday lights, still blinking behind him. I was holding a gift box wrapped in gold foil with a bow I'd tied myself that morning. Inside was a hand-picked chess set for my grandson, carved mahogany, real weight in the pieces. I thought he'd love it, but he didn't even come to the door. I had knocked, waited, smiled when I heard footsteps, and then Dylan opened it, stepped out, blocking the view inside like I was a stranger trying to sell something. He didn't hug me. He didn't even say Merry Christmas. I told him I brought a little something for Evan and that I had a few things in the car, in case I could stay the night like last year. That's when he said it. "The house is too full. You should get a motel." I blinked. Just once. The snow was falling behind me, soft and steady. I thought maybe I misheard. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe he was just tired. Work stress. Holiday nerves. Then came Mara. She stepped out behind him with her flawless hair and tight smile. She glanced at the box in my hands, then up at me like she was scanning for flaws. She said, "It's probably better this way. Evan's got school stuff everywhere, and the guest room has laundry. At your age, you'd be more comfortable somewhere with better support. A proper bed. Heat that actually works." I didn't respond. Not because I agreed, but because I knew that anything I said would sound small, defensive. I had been preparing myself for something like this. And still, it felt like the ground gave way beneath me. Then Mara added one more thing before she turned around. "Honestly, you're just kind of in the way, Nora. You should be grateful anyone makes room for you at all these days." The door didn't slam. It clicked shut. Quiet. Neat. Like I was being filed away. I stood there on the porch with that gift box in my hand and the snow catching on the shoulders of my coat. A neighbor across the street was shoveling his driveway, music playing from a speaker clipped to his garage. Silent night. It had been silent, all right. I had just tested them. Because the truth is, I didn't need to stay there. I had options. Plenty. What they didn't know was that 2 months ago, I sold the lake house. The one in Michigan. The one my late husband and I built up over 25 years. The one we scraped and painted every summer, where Dylan caught his first fish. It sold for $4 million. Clean, quiet, no fuss. And I didn't tell a soul. I wanted to know what love looked like without money attached. I asked to stay for Christmas to see what my son and his wife would say when they thought I had nowhere else to go. No leverage, no backup, just me. Now I knew. So I turned around, stepped down the porch stairs, and walked slowly to my car. I didn't rush. Let the snow soak into my boots, let the cold rise up into my bones. I wanted to feel it, not to punish myself, to remember. The back seat still had the scarf I knitted last winter, and a tin of cinnamon cookies I had planned to give to Mara's mother. I'd take them to the shelter downtown instead. They'd appreciate a scarf. Inside the car, I sat for a moment with the keys in my lap. I could hear my breath, nothing else. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. I didn't scroll. I knew the number by heart. Whitestone Lodge, the most exclusive winter resort in the entire region. They answered on the second ring. I said, "Yes, I'd like to reserve Suite 1708. For one. Starting tonight." They asked if I needed airport transport. I told them no. I'd be driving myself. They confirmed my name. I told them to make sure it appeared on the guest board in the lobby. I wanted to say, "Welcome, Ms. Nora Whitfield. And please, don't mention who paid for the gala. Just note that the house's sponsor has a story to tell, because this year, I won't be sitting on the sidelines waiting for scraps. This year, they're going to learn what it really means to make someone feel invisible. And I still have the keys to everything. I checked into the Whitestone Lodge at 8:47 p.m. The lobby smelled like pine and polished wood. My heels clicked across marble tile, and my name, just as I requested, shone on the welcome board beside the fireplace. Welcome, Ms. Nora Whitfield. That was the only warmth I felt that night. The suite was quiet, too quiet. I walked into the room without turning on the lights. The snow outside the window had picked up, thick and heavy now. It painted the balcony in white and swallowed the roads. A blizzard was coming, but I had already lived through one inside my son's house. I placed the gift box down on the desk and pulled the curtains closed. Then I sat. Not in grief. Not yet. I let the silence do its work. Let it creep through my spine and settle in my throat. I closed my eyes and pictured the hallway back home. The place where Dylan used to run down in his pajamas, Christmas morning, screaming about stockings. The same hallway I scrubbed on my knees when we couldn't afford a mop. And now I was too much, too old, too inconvenient. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. But I felt the burn behind my ribs. The kind that doesn't show on your face but leaves claw marks inside. My phone buzzed, a notification from the joint account Dylan helped me set up last year. Back then, he said it was easier to manage all my little bills if he could monitor it. I remembered his exact words. "Let me help, Mum. You shouldn't worry about all this stuff at your age. You've done enough." Turns out, that was the first red flag I didn't want to see, but I saw it now. The text read, "Withdrawal attempt declined. Insufficient funds." I blinked. I hadn't touched that account in weeks. My savings from the house sale had already been transferred to a separate account I set up in private. I made sure of that. But this alert wasn't about the new money. This was from the old account, the one Dylan insisted I keep active so he could help. I tapped in. Overdraft. Several large charges. Travel agencies. Designer boutiques. Spa bookings in Mara's name. All dated within the last 6 days. One for a first-class flight to Aspen. One for a resort in Napa Valley. One for a custom gift basket with a handwritten note attached that read, "For the best wife in the world, you deserve everything." I stared at the screen, not because I was surprised, but because it confirmed what I suspected long before tonight. This wasn't just about Christmas. This had been a long time coming. They didn't want me in their house because I had nothing they believed they could take anymore. They thought the house was gone. They thought the money vanished with it. That I was just a sentimental burden showing up with cookies and homemade ornaments. They thought I was powerless, and I had let them think it. For months. There was a knock at the suite door. Room service. I didn't order anything. I opened it to a young man holding a tray with hot tea and a note. "Compliments of management. We're honored to host you this evening." He placed the tray down and nodded once before leaving. No fanfare, just the way I liked it. I sipped the tea. It was chamomile. Calming, sweet. But my hands were steady. I didn't need calming anymore. I needed clarity. I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the envelope I'd kept with me since October. Inside were printed emails. A copy of the fake joint title agreement Dylan tried to get me to sign, masked as a standard home refinancing form. He said it was a formality, that it would protect me in case of emergency. It was a trap. One signature, and they could have cashed in my share of the lake house equity before the sale even closed. But I didn't sign it. I told them I'd think about it, then quietly handed it over to an attorney I trusted. He confirmed what I suspected. They wanted control of my home, control of my name, control of my worth. Now they thought they had none of it, so they discarded me like expired groceries. Too bad, because I had every receipt. I had the emails, the text messages, the audio clips of conversations Dylan had with his financial advisor, accidentally recorded on the iPad he borrowed from me last spring. He spoke clearly. He said, "My mum won't last long. She's tired. She'll let us take over. Once she's out, it's ours." Ours. That's what he said. I sat back in the chair, tea half finished. There it was, the last thread I needed. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't just selfishness. It was a full-blown campaign to erase me from everything I built. And now, it was time to rebuild the battlefield. Not for revenge, for correction. The kind that doesn't just sting, the kind that scars. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed the concierge. "Yes, I'd like to schedule a meeting with your event manager. Tomorrow morning, I'll be funding a private gala here, and I'd like full control of the guest list and speaker lineup." They asked if it would be for family. I paused. No, not family, just witnesses. By 8 the next morning, I was standing in the main hall of the Whitestone Lodge, reviewing floor plans with the event coordinator. She was young, ambitious, the type who wore tailored jackets and didn't blink when I requested full anonymity on the sponsorship contract. She pointed to the ballroom on the printout. "We can seat up to 300 if we use this layout. Stage here, buffet there. Sound check and lighting rehearsal can start by the 27th. We'll need the final guest list no later than—" No list. She blinked, mid-sentence. "I don't want a formal list. Send open invites to the resort's New Year's week guests. Include names from the Veterans Care Center across town, teachers from the public school district, frontline nurses, retirees. Anyone over 65 gets a front row seat." She took a beat before scribbling notes. "And make sure the speaker program ends with a statement from the house's anonymous benefactor. But no stage lights on me, no spotlight. I'll be at the podium. They won't know it's me until I speak." The young woman looked up again, this time with a little curiosity in her eyes. But she didn't ask. She nodded and kept writing. By 10, I was walking back to my suite with a list of vendors to approve and a folder of logistics to sign. My pace was quicker than usual. My head clear, my spine straighter. I hadn't felt this alive in months, possibly years. Inside the suite, sunlight spilled across the desk. The gift box from the night before was still sitting there, unopened. I slid it aside and opened my laptop. A new email notification blinked across the top of the screen. Subject line: "Need to discuss title paperwork. Urgent. Sender: Dylan Whitfield." I didn't click on it. Instead, I scrolled through the digital storage folder I created weeks ago, labeled simply Leverage. In it were the scanned copies of the forged refinance forms, the clipped audio of Dylan speaking to his advisor, the withdrawal alerts from my joint account, and even screenshots of Mara's private group chats planning their future investment property trips. All funded, unknowingly, by me. They wanted a house. They wanted control. What they had now was a target drawn on their backs, not from hate, from consequence. I forwarded the folder to my private attorney with a short message. "Deliver printed copies to Whitestone Lodge under sealed envelope. Hold for Ms. Nora Whitfield. Do not release to anyone else. No more delays." I shut the laptop and stood up, grabbing my coat. It was time for one last errand before everything began. Downstairs, I asked the valet for my car. The snow had stopped. Roads were slick but passable. The air carried that brittle kind of chill that stung without warning. I liked it. It reminded me I was still here. The drive took less than 20 minutes. I pulled into the old neighborhood, the one Dylan and Mara moved into 2 years ago. New builds, neutral siding, HOA flags waving from mailboxes. Every house looked the same. Empty, sterile, like a showroom. Their driveway was full. 2 sedans, 1 new SUV. I parked down the block out of sight. Then I waited. At precisely 11:12 a.m., the garage door opened and Mara stepped out, phone to her ear, designer coat slung over her shoulder. She got into the SUV and backed out without once looking toward the street. A minute later, Dylan came out with Evan. The boy was holding a hockey stick, bundled in layers, a hat pulled low. Dylan ruffled his hair, said something, then watched as the neighbor's kid ran up and pulled Evan along toward the cul-de-sac. Dylan stood on the steps for a beat, alone, then went back inside. I drove off before he could look my way. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to look one last time at what I was about to take from them. Not the money. That would come later. I was going to take the one thing they never expected me to touch, their image. Because to people like Dylan and Mara, perception was everything. Appearances were curated, reputation groomed. They didn't just want to be successful. They wanted to look flawless while stepping on the backs of those who made it possible. And I was done being part of that backdrop. Back at the lodge, I met again with the AV technician. We reviewed the screen setup, the timing of the main presentation, and the file labeled Final Playback. He opened the file. I nodded. Make sure this rolls after the final toast. He asked if I wanted sound. I said yes, loud. Then I handed him a small flash drive. This contains the second layer. He raised an eyebrow. Trust me, it will get their attention. He smiled and secured it into the system. By noon, I had signed every vendor contract, approved every seating map, and sent an updated schedule to the manager. New Year's Gala, Voices of Grace, funded by an anonymous guest, featuring stories of aging with dignity, family, and second chances, staged not as a lecture, but as a mirror. By 2:00 p.m., the emails began to roll in. Dylan, Mara, both back to back. Mum, we didn't mean to upset you last night. Things got chaotic. Evan was sick. The house was a mess. Please let us explain. We really want to see you before the new year. Maybe come by for brunch tomorrow. Just us. No pressure. My reply was simple. I'm unavailable this week. Thank you for the invitation. There was no anger in it, just facts. They had their chance to treat me like a mother. Now they would meet the woman behind the curtain, the one with the keys, the one they thought had nothing left to unlock. At 7:03 a.m., I received an email with the subject line, Final Approval, Media Elements. It included 2 attachments and a note from the AV team confirming that the main presentation and secondary reveal were both programmed into the gala run of show. All they needed was a verbal green light. They had it. The first file was the official montage. Beautiful. Uplifting. Faces of seniors from the local community, laughing, reading, dancing, giving interviews about what it means to age with dignity. I had selected the footage myself, sitting with the event director the night before, carefully choosing each voice. The second file was something else entirely. It opened with the audio. Dylan never knew I recorded. The same one from the iPad left on during his phone call with the financial planner. No editing, no cutting. Just his voice, crisp and shameless. She's got maybe another year in her. 2 tops. We play this right, that lake house becomes ours without a fight. The clip ended with a laugh. Not loud, but clear. After that, the screen would fade to black. Then a single line of text would appear. My mother is a burden. And finally a photo. One taken by the doorbell camera 2 nights ago. Me holding the gift box, standing in the snow, facing the shut door. Alone. It would hit hard. And that was the point. I was done being careful. At 8:15, I met with a courier in the lobby. He handed me a sealed manila envelope from my attorney. Inside were printed documents, notarized copies of the forged title transfer forms, detailed account activity from the joint checking Dylan used to drain with Mara, and screenshots of Mara's group chat planning the New Year's trip to Belize, booked with my name on the credit card. I flipped through them one by one, my fingers steady. Every page was a nail, every detail, a plank. I was building the coffin of their lies. And this time, I'd be the one sealing it shut. At 9 o'clock sharp, I made my way to the resort's media room. 2 men from the AV team were adjusting cables and finalizing stage lighting. I handed them the envelope. Print copies of all of this. Enough for each table at the gala. They glanced at the contents and nodded without comment. I left them to it and stepped into the hallway, heading toward the spa lounge for a short meeting with the hotel director. But halfway there, I paused. There she was. Mara. She stood at the concierge desk, dressed in a tailored coat, sunglasses perched high, her tone sweet but clipped. My husband and I are staying in one of the premium suites. We've been invited to the New Year's gala by one of your VIP sponsors. Could you confirm the seating arrangement? I moved quickly but quietly, slipping behind a wooden pillar. She didn't see me. The concierge typed something into his computer and offered her a polite smile. The guest list is still being finalized. But yes, your names are on the invitation list. Mara nodded, pleased, then leaned in slightly. Make sure it's near the front. My husband has some involvement in the community and, well, we know the family hosting. That was her way, always implying more than she had. Painting her life in soft lighting so no one saw the cracks. Except this time, the cracks were about to split wide open. I turned and walked away before I was spotted, my hands curled into fists inside my pockets, not from rage, but resolve. They were already here. They walked into the fire, smiling, thinking it was theirs to light. At 11:30, I received a text from Dylan. Thanks for the quick reply, Mum. We're happy you're getting some rest. Hope to see you soon. Evan misses you. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent a final message to the AV team. Everything is approved. Proceed as planned. No delays, no edits. By noon, the entire Whitestone staff was moving with purpose. Tablecloths pressed, floral centerpieces arranged, speaker stands tested. The ballroom had transformed into something glowing and soft, inviting. But underneath it, every piece was sharp, precise, loaded. This wasn't a party. It was a performance, and the lead role was mine. At 1:15, I sat in the back of the main hall, watching them set the final rows of chairs. I took out the last item from my purse, the small silver key that once opened the guest cabin behind our lake house. Dylan used to hide in there with his books. I used to leave hot cocoa on the porch swing. He thought I'd lost it. But I never lose anything that matters, and that key would soon mean more than he could ever imagine, because he and Mara thought they had burned every bridge. But I still held the map, and I knew exactly where to strike. At 4:06 p.m., I stood by the second-floor railing of the Whitestone Lodge, staring down into the grand ballroom. It had been transformed into a sea of amber light and white linens. The floral arrangements were subtle, no overdone extravagance, just long-stemmed calla lilies placed in tall crystal vases, standing like sentinels along the edge of the stage. The guests were arriving, slowly at first, then in clusters. I recognized the hotel manager guiding a small group of early arrivals to their seats. Among them was a woman in a blue shawl I had met in the spa lounge 2 days earlier. She had worked in home care for 30 years. She smiled as she passed, not recognizing me in the sharp, structured blazer I wore tonight. Good. I didn't want recognition yet. Behind her came two more groups: teachers, retirees. Some faces I had seen on the charity list from the Veterans Centre. Every one of them was seated at the front, just as I asked. At 4:18 p.m., a new group entered. Dylan, Mara, and Evan, trailing behind them with a look I couldn't read. Mara walked like she owned the floor, hair curled to perfection, lips painted in some new shade of red she must have picked just for tonight. Dylan followed close, adjusting the cuffs on his jacket, scanning the room like a man checking for cameras he couldn't see. They were early. I had expected them by 5. They had no idea what was coming. The concierge approached and directed them to the left center of the ballroom. Not front row. Not close enough to be on camera during the opening speeches. I saw the flicker in Mara's eyes. She wanted visibility. But this wasn't their stage. At 4:26, I made my way down the private staircase and slipped into the hallway behind the stage. The AV team was already there, adjusting final settings, confirming cues. The flash drive was in. The files were locked. The timer was synced. No more rehearsals. No more hypotheticals. At 4:31, the event coordinator approached me quietly. They're all seated. I nodded once. The lights dimmed, and the gala began. The first speaker took the stage, a retired nurse who shared her story of surviving the pandemic, losing friends, and finding strength in community after being forgotten by her own children. She was powerful, poised. She didn't cry, but her voice cracked once, and the room fell silent with her. Then came a teacher, forced into early retirement after a stroke, who now volunteered at the same school district that had cut her position. She smiled through every word, but her hands trembled. The guests were listening. Even Mara stopped checking her phone. At 5:07, the event host returned to the stage. And now, we welcome a final message, a reflection from the anonymous sponsor of tonight's event, a voice from experience. A reminder that stories, no matter how painful, are meant to be heard. The lights dimmed again. The first video began, soft piano music. A series of faces appeared on the screen. All elderly, all real. Some with canes, some with walkers. Some sitting quietly in nursing home beds. They spoke about what it felt like to be unseen, forgotten, made to feel irrelevant by the people they once raised. I saw Dylan shift in his seat. Mara crossed her arms, then the music faded, the screen went black, and a new video began. There was no warning, only the voice. Dylan's voice. Clear, unedited. She's got maybe another year in her. 2 tops. We play this right. That lake house becomes ours without a fight. It played twice. Then again. 3 full repetitions. Gasps filled the ballroom. Someone dropped a glass. Then the screen changed, a still image. Me. Standing outside his front door, holding the gold-wrapped gift box. Face turned to the side, the snow falling. Underneath, a line of text. My mother is a burden. A silence deeper than sound dropped into the room. Then came the second file. The photos. One after another. The forged title paperwork. The bank withdrawals. The luxury resort charges billed to my account. The receipts for the spa packages in Mara's name. The group chat messages, planning the Belize trip. Each image shown just long enough to land like a blow. And then came the final screen. A simple white background, 2 words in bold. I remember. The lights returned slowly. People turned in their chairs, murmuring, whispers rolling like thunder under the surface. Dylan's face had drained of all colour. Mara looked frozen. Evan was staring at me now, wide-eyed. He knew. He had heard his father say things when he thought no one was listening. Children always know. The host returned to the stage, visibly tense. Thank you to our anonymous sponsor, and to all those who remind us that silence is not strength. Tonight, we listen. Applause started slow, then spread. I didn't stand. I didn't move. I didn't have to. At 5:28, I walked out the side hall as the first reporters approached Dylan and Mara's table, cameras flashing, notebooks open. Mara tried to smile, failed. Dylan stood, spoke to no one. He was shaking his head like he couldn't make sense of what had just happened. I passed the security guard by the side exit. He tipped his cap. I walked through the snow with my hands free, shoulders light, breath sharp in the cold. No more rooms with closed doors. No more soft silence. I had said what needed saying, and I hadn't said a word. At 6:03 p.m., I stepped into the suite, closed the door, and let out the breath I had held for over an hour. The ballroom was still behind me, but the fallout had already begun. The news vans were parked outside the resort. Photographers had gathered at the main entrance. Phones were buzzing in every pocket in that room. And I knew, by now, the clip had gone viral. The AV team sent me a quiet confirmation minutes earlier. The footage had been captured clean, the audio sharp, and the reaction from the crowd was already being shared by attendees on social media. Without my name, just the truth. That was all I ever needed. I poured myself a glass of water from the carafe by the minibar. My hand was steady, not from control, but release. The kind that only comes when the dam breaks and the flood rushes forward, dragging the rot out with it. Then the knock came, soft, hesitant. I didn't answer right away. The second knock came harder. I opened the door. Dylan stood there, coat off, collar loose, like he had forgotten how to wear it. Behind him, down the hallway, Mara paced with her phone, speaking fast and low. Her face was tight, makeup cracked at the edges. He stepped inside before I invited him. You did this. I didn't move. He closed the door behind him, hands clenched at his sides. You made us look like monsters in front of everyone we know. I watched him carefully. You did that to yourselves. His voice cracked, not out of grief, but disbelief. You aired private family things. You mean the part where you said I wouldn't last the year, or the part where you forged my name? His face flushed deep red. I never meant for that to happen. You meant it when you said it. That was enough. He ran a hand through his hair and turned his back to me. I could see the tremble in his shoulders. You humiliated me. I walked past him and picked up a sealed envelope from the desk. I handed it to him without a word. He hesitated, then opened it. Inside were clean, final copies of everything I had shown. But this time, there was something else. The new version of my will, the new trust agreement, the official transfer of all assets, including the estate proceeds, into a private foundation in my name. One set up for elderly women who have experienced abuse or abandonment by their own families. Every document notarized, every detail binding. Dylan scanned the pages in silence. His eyes moved, but his expression didn't change. You really did it. I did. He lowered the papers. So what now? We're cut off. You're not owed anything. I said it calmly, like I was explaining weather. You took my money. You used my name. You lied. You turned my kindness into currency, and now you get nothing." He stepped toward me, voice rising. "You're destroying this family." I looked him straight in the eyes. "You destroyed it when you decided I was disposable." There was nothing theatrical in my tone, just fact. "You and Mara made your choices. Now you live with them." He dropped the envelope on the chair beside him. "You think this makes you strong. It doesn't. It makes you cruel." I let that sit. I thought of every night I sat at their kitchen table babysitting Evan so they could go out. Every grocery bill I covered. Every mortgage payment I made when Dylan's startup failed and they told no one. Every meal I cooked while they posted family portraits, tagging me as the sweet retired grandma who just loved helping. I didn't answer his accusation. He wasn't here for truth. He was here because he had been caught. A knock came again. This time it was Mara. Her voice cut through the room. "You planned this." I stayed silent. She stepped inside, shutting the door behind her, heels clicking hard on the tile. "You used us to stage some public revenge fantasy. You always wanted control, and this is how you take it back, making us look like we abused you." I looked at her, not with anger, with pity. "You didn't need help looking that way." She scoffed and looked at Dylan. "You need to fix this. Tell people it was a misunderstanding." He didn't speak. Mara turned to me again. "We had one bad night. That's all. You could have come inside. You could have stayed. You chose to be offended." I stepped forward now, just enough to close the space. "You chose to shut that door. You chose to drain my accounts. You chose to lie, to manipulate, to laugh about my death. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was cruelty." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. So I finished it for her. "You said I was in the way, and now I've stepped aside, but not quietly." They both stood there, frozen. Then Dylan spoke again, softer this time. "What happens next?" I took a long breath. "That depends on you. You can let this break you, or you can change, but not for me, for Evan." I turned away from them, walked to the window, and stared out at the snowfall beginning again. The storm wasn't over, but I had already built the shelter. At 7:12 p.m., I stood outside the boardroom on the third floor of the Whitestone Lodge, waiting for the resort's legal liaison to finish printing the last set of documents. Inside that room sat the final stage of what I had spent the last 5 months preparing. Not just a dramatic public reveal, not just exposure. Consequence. Binding. Undeniable. And permanent. She stepped out with a folder, slim but heavy. "It's all here. The trust documents, the revised disbursement schedule, the asset protection clause is ironclad. Once it's filed tomorrow morning, there's no reversing it." I nodded and took the folder. Behind her, the director of guest operations appeared at the hallway corner. "They're waiting in suite 914. I thanked him without hesitation. I made my way down the hallway, each step more deliberate than the last. This time, I wasn't walking toward confrontation. I was walking into the verdict. When I reached the suite, the door was already cracked. I pushed it open. Dylan and Mara sat at the table. Their coats were folded over the back of the chairs. The lights were dim, no wine, no music. The air was stiff with tension. Mara looked up first. "You could have told us this in private." I didn't sit. I placed the folder in front of them and opened it. "There's no need to talk. Just read." Dylan's eyes scanned the top page. His jaw flexed, but he didn't speak. Mara leaned in. "This is everything." I said nothing. She flipped through the trust revisions, the clauses about asset redirection, the locked-in foundation protections. She stopped at the page that made her face tighten. You left Evan everything. I nodded once, but not without terms. Dylan looked up. You put our son in a position that punishes us to benefit him. I finally sat down. I put him in a position to understand choice, something you both lost sight of. Mara's voice rose. This is cruel. He's 11. He doesn't need to know any of this. No, I said. He doesn't need to know the details. But one day he will need to understand that love and loyalty are not just performances. They are earned, protected, fought for. Dylan closed the folder and leaned forward. What do you want from us? Because if this is about revenge, it's not. Then what is it? Control, power, recognition? I leaned forward too. It's about clarity, about making sure you never again weaponize kindness, never again use proximity to strip someone of their worth, never again pretend that betrayal is a slip of the tongue instead of a plan. You want forgiveness, Dylan, but you haven't even begun to show remorse. He looked down, jaw tight. Mara stood and crossed her arms. You used the same system you claim to hate. Manipulated perception, controlled narrative. You humiliated your own family in front of strangers. No, I said. You did that. With every lie, every forged document, every message, every swipe of my card. All I did was hold up the mirror. She didn't move, didn't blink. I continued. You both wanted access. Access to my money, my home, my time. But never my voice. Now you've heard it. And so has everyone else. Dylan finally spoke. So that's it. You're done with us. I looked at him, not with anger, not with softness, with truth. I'm done pretending you haven't already been done with me. A pause fell between us, the kind that doesn't come from silence, but from the last nail hitting wood. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out one last envelope. Smaller, handwritten. This is for Evan. Mara hesitated before taking it. What is it? A letter, for when he's older, when he's ready to understand who his grandmother really was. Not the version you edited, the one who knew what was taken from her, and what she chose to do with the pieces left. Mara sat back down, her arms slowly uncrossing. She didn't speak again. Dylan nodded once, then again. He reached for the folder and closed it. We'll sign whatever's needed. I didn't move. You don't have to. It's already final. This isn't a negotiation. It's a declaration. He stood and placed the folder back on the table. Then I guess this is goodbye. No, I said. This is correction. The goodbye happened the night you locked your door and told me to get a motel. He looked at me one more time, but it wasn't defiance. It wasn't anger. It was defeat. He walked out. Mara followed, slower, glancing back only once. When the door closed behind them, I let out the smallest breath. A breath I had held since the day I walked away from that porch with snow in my boots and a gift in my hands. This wasn't peace, but it was justice, and for now, that was enough. By 8:05 p.m., I was back in my suite. The fire in the hearth had dimmed, but the heat still curled through the air. I didn't bother turning on the main lights. I let the shadows stay. I let the room breathe around me as my body settled into the armchair near the window. Snow was falling again. Not violently, but steady, certain, a quiet kind of reckoning. I poured a glass of water, not wine. I didn't need to toast. I had already won. My phone lit up on the table. Texts came in from names I hadn't heard in years. Old friends, neighbours, women from the library board, the staff at the town community centre. Each message a variation of the same truth. They saw it. They heard it. They knew. And underneath all of it, they understood why I had to do what I did. I put the phone face down and let the silence press against me. Then came the knock. Not frantic, not soft, just firm. I opened the door, and there he stood. Evan, no coat, no gloves, just a sweatshirt pulled over his small frame, cheeks red from the cold, sneakers damp. Behind him, at the end of the hallway, Dylan stood frozen. I looked at Evan. He didn't speak. I stepped aside, and he walked in without hesitation. He sat at the edge of the sofa, fingers clenched together, legs swinging slightly above the floor. I sat across from him. The boy didn't look angry. He didn't look scared. He looked aware. My dad said I couldn't come. I waited, but I told him I needed to. My voice stayed level. Why? He blinked fast. His voice cracked, because I heard what he said on the video, and I wanted to say sorry. My chest pulled tight, but I didn't move. I'm not saying it because he told me to. He didn't. He's really mad right now. At everything. I believe you. He looked up. His eyes were too big for his face, too full for his age. I know it was wrong, and I don't think you're a burden. You always helped, even when Mum was tired or Dad was busy or they didn't ask. You still came. I swallowed hard, quietly, and I saw the box, the one with the bow. I knew it was for me. It was. He nodded, biting his lower lip. Can I stay for a little while? I stood, walked to the closet, pulled out a spare blanket, and laid it across his lap. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. He leaned back, small body sinking into the cushions, shoulders finally relaxing. We sat like that for a while. No words, only the sound of wind curling against the glass. Then Dylan entered. He didn't say a word at first. He walked in slowly, hat in hand, face pale. His eyes moved straight to Evan, who was now nearly asleep, curled under the blanket. I should have come to you sooner. I didn't move. He exhaled. I've been spinning all day, trying to fix the image, trying to stop the damage, but the truth is there's no PR cleanup for this. No, there isn't. I kept everything quiet, for a long time, because I didn't want to believe who I raised had become what I saw. I know. He lowered himself into the chair Evan had vacated. His shoulders sagged. He's all I have now. You had me, Dylan, and you spent me like pocket change. His jaw tensed, and for the first time, I saw it. Not guilt, not shame, grief. He looked toward the fire. The night after Dad died, I was scared. I didn't know how to carry anything without you. And instead of leaning on you, I started pushing away, because I thought control would make me feel safe. It didn't. I stared at him. Control doesn't make you safe. It makes you selfish. He nodded slowly. I was trying to build a legacy, something impressive, something that proved I could handle it. You built a performance, and you forgot who clapped for you when no one else was watching. His hands clenched the hat in his lap. I can't fix what I did. No, but you can fix what comes after. He looked at Evan, still sleeping, breathing deep. I want to, for him. Then stop speaking like a man explaining himself and start acting like one willing to change. He nodded once, and he stood. But before he left, he placed something on the table. The silver key, the same one he had taken from the drawer of the old cabin after the sale, thinking I wouldn't notice. I thought I could hold on to it. I already did. He left the room without another word. The fire cracked. I leaned back. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something close. And sometimes, close is enough to begin. At 6:47 the next morning, I stood at the balcony of the lodge, watching the snow settle across the parking lot in slow, deliberate layers. There was a silence outside that reminded me of those Michigan winters in the lake house, back when the world still felt like something that could be held. I sipped my coffee and waited. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I was waiting for closure. By 7:15, the email from the foundation team arrived. The final registration had cleared. The Whitfield Grace Fund was now fully active. The first batch of grants was scheduled to be distributed by the end of January, priority going to elderly women facing eviction or living in transitional shelters after financial exploitation by family members. The irony didn't escape me. What they took from me would now help others who lost even more. I closed the laptop. At 8:04, there was a knock. This time, I didn't hesitate. Dylan walked in, holding a folder, his face calm but unreadable. I wanted to bring this to you in person. He set the folder on the table. Inside were signed amendments. He and Mara had legally rescinded their financial access to anything in my name. He had even added a statement removing himself from any future decision-making regarding my estate. I read every line, then set it down. This was overdue. I know. His voice was steady, not defensive, not bitter. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to hand it to you myself. You deserve that. I stayed quiet. He looked around the room. Evan cried when he got home last night, not because he was scared, because he finally understood what we did, what it cost. I looked at him. And what about you? He met my eyes. It broke something in me I didn't realize was even fragile. The way he looked at me, like I was a stranger who had just let him down for the first time. You did. Dylan nodded slowly, swallowing hard. I've spent so long trying to build things that impress the world. I forgot to protect the things that mattered more. You were the first person who believed I had potential, and somehow I convinced myself you were in the way. I exhaled, not from exhaustion, from weight finally beginning to lift. I didn't want to become the kind of mother who teaches by punishment. You didn't. You became the kind who teaches by presence, even when people pretend you're not there. I sat down at the table. He remained standing. You don't owe me anything, Mum, but I owe you acknowledgement, and I want to give you that. Now, out loud. Not just for the money, not just for the legacy, but for everything in between. I held his gaze. Then do it in front of them. Dylan stiffened. I meant it. You spent years curating the narrative of our family. You painted me as background, a supporting character, one that only existed in captions. Now you stand up and tell the truth where it matters, not just to me, to everyone else who watched you perform. He nodded, slowly. I will. Not with a camera, not for a headline, just with my voice. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. And leave the trust to Evan untouched. He already has enough to carry. Dylan's breath caught, then steadied. He will never hear another lie about you from our mouths. You have my word. Then use it well. He left the suite quietly. By 10:12 a.m., the resort's press room was being prepped for a final briefing. It wasn't a formal media event, just a closing panel for the gala sponsors. Dylan had asked the organizers if he could speak briefly. They agreed. I stayed at the back, out of sight, watching from the hallway. He stepped up to the microphone with his voice quiet but unwavering. He didn't read from paper. He didn't perform. He confessed. He spoke about entitlement, about inheritance, about mistaking access for relationship, about turning love into leverage, about his mother, not as a cautionary tale, but as a lighthouse he had tried to snuff out and failed. There was no applause when he finished, only silence, the kind that meant it landed, the kind that meant people were looking at themselves differently, the kind that tells you no one is clapping because they're still processing the blow. He stepped down and walked straight past me without looking. That was enough. At 11:46, I left the resort. No cameras, no reporters, only me and the road ahead. Justice had never been about punishment. It was about restoration. And I was no longer someone they could erase. I was someone they now had to live up to. I stood in the hallway for a moment, steadying myself. The door to the dining room was just slightly ajar. I could hear them, Brendan, Kayla, and her brother Devin, laughing about something. Their voices clinked together like cheap crystal, too loud, too forced. I tightened my grip on the envelope in my hand and pushed the door open. They all looked up. The laughter stopped like someone had snapped a string. Brendan raised his eyebrows. He was still holding a fork, frozen in mid-air. I walked in slowly, the heels of my boots clicking against the hardwood floor. I placed the envelope at the head of the table, directly in front of the empty chair I had refused to sit in last night. This morning had been a blur, but after the attorney's call, everything fell into place. The timing, the paperwork, the final meeting. I didn't say a word yet. I just waited. Kayla narrowed her eyes. Devin leaned back, trying to play casual, but his face was already stiff. Brendan looked down at the envelope, then at me. He finally broke the silence. "Mum, what is this?" I took a breath, let the room settle. Then I nodded to the envelope. "Your Christmas gift, but I suggest you open it after dessert. It's not really sweet." Kayla scoffed. "If it's another passive-aggressive poem or one of those letters about family and love, I swear—" "It's not," I said. Brendan reached for it, tore it open, unfolded the papers inside. As he read, the colour in his face began to change, from pink to pale to grey. Kayla grabbed it from him, skimmed the top, then flipped to the second page. Her mouth opened slightly, lips dry. "What is this?" I crossed my arms. "That, my dear, is the official record of ownership for the lake house. The one you assumed I'd hand over out of guilt or loneliness or some twisted sense of maternal duty." Brendan stood up. His chair screeched backward. "You transferred the house, no," I corrected him. "I restructured everything. The house, the assets, the trust. And not to you." Kayla looked like she was about to scream, but she caught herself. Her voice came out lower, like a warning hiss. "You can't do that. We already submitted paperwork. You submitted forged documents based on outdated ownership status. What you have is meaningless now." Brendan walked around the table, his voice rising. You knew what we were planning, and you just played along, like nothing was wrong." I met his stare head on. "I gave you rope. You chose what to do with it." Devin stood up too now, trying to insert himself. "Wait, so what does this mean exactly?" "The house isn't part of the trust anymore." "Not the trust you thought. I created a new one, under a new foundation, and the beneficiary is not either of you." Brendan's voice cracked. "Who then?" "Paige. Her kid." "No." I waited, let the silence stretch long enough for it to sting. "I've donated it. All of it. The lake house, the marina rights, the boat fleet. to a new foundation for women in their 60s and above who were pushed aside by their families after retirement. It will be used to run weekend retreats and life skills workshops. The board is already set. Kayla staggered back like someone had hit her. Brendan's fists clenched. That's fraud. You used our names in the holiday proposal. That makes you liable. No, I said calmly. I used your names in a preliminary draft. The final paperwork? Scrubbed clean, checked by 3 attorneys. Not a single line connects you to the new trust. Brendan lunged forward, as if to grab the papers from the table. I stepped back. Careful. You're still on camera. Remember, this whole place got updated with security, including audio. Kayla looked at Brendan. For the first time, she looked worried. Not angry, not greedy, just unsettled. You knew this whole time, she said. You pretended to be the sweet, confused old lady. But you were already planning this. I didn't deny it. You treated me like a servant, like a burden, like an afterthought. I turned to Brendan. You lied to me. You exploited my grief. And you used your daughter as a shield. Then I looked at Kayla. And you tried to humiliate me. In my own home. In front of my granddaughter. I took another breath. So I decided it was time to stop asking for a seat at the table. And build my own. Brendan slammed his palm on the table. You don't get to act righteous now. You think you're the victim here. But we're your family. You left us out to rot. Family doesn't require inheritance. And inheritance doesn't equal loyalty. I pointed at the door. You can leave. The house is off limits as of this morning. Security codes changed. Your name's removed from access. Kayla's voice cracked. You'll regret this. We took care of you. We kept you company. You kept me useful. That's not the same as loved. The silence was sharp. I could see it finally sinking in. The illusion of control, gone. The assumed entitlement, shattered. The room felt different now. Not just because of the fire crackling behind me, or the heavy curtains drawn against the snow. It was the weight of power shifting, not loud, not messy, just clean, sharp. Brendan walked out first, shoulders stiff, not a word. Kayla followed, her shoes echoing behind his. Devin lingered, looking like he wanted to say something, but thought better of it. When the door finally clicked shut, I walked back to the head of the table. I sat down, and for the first time in years, I tasted peace. The next morning began in silence. Snow lined the edge of the stone patio where I sat alone with my coffee, wrapped in the old green cardigan Walter used to wear when he worked late in the garage. It still smelled like sawdust and peppermint. I didn't touch the drink. My hands were steady, but my breath wasn't. Inside, the voices were getting louder. Kayla's heels struck the tile like gunshots. Brendan followed close behind, his voice sharp and clipped. They had just come from the lawyer's office. They had read the document. They had seen the new deed. And now they were walking into my kitchen like strangers. I didn't look up until Brendan's voice cut across the sliding door. You went too far, Mum. I stood, slowly placing the untouched mug on the table. My reflection in the glass door didn't flinch, not anymore. You locked us out of everything, he said. The accounts, the trust, even the utilities are in someone else's name now. Kayla folded her arms, lips thin. She looked less like a woman wronged and more like someone who had miscalculated a chess game. You kept pretending to be senile, all that sweet old lady act, but the whole time, you were 2 steps ahead, she hissed. I nodded. I was. Brendan's voice cracked, the first sign of panic I had seen in him in years. You really gave everything to a foundation? A bunch of strangers? Not strangers. Women like me. Women who were told to be quiet, to give, to bend until they broke. I'm building something that outlasts lake houses and Christmas dinners. Brendan took a step forward. You're destroying this family. I looked him in the eye. No, I stopped pretending we had one. For a long second, no one spoke. Even the wind outside had gone still. Brendan glanced at Kayla, then back at me. He was no longer angry. He was calculating. You're doing this for revenge. You want to humiliate us. No, I want to set things right. There's a difference. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You want to be some kind of hero, a martyr with a pension. Fine. But don't expect us to sit here and applaud while you burn everything down. Kayla stepped forward now, her voice sharp as broken glass. You could have given us time. A chance. You didn't have to go nuclear. I did give you time. I gave you years. I watched you humiliate me at Christmas, sideline me in my own home, erase me from my own legacy. And you still expected more. Brendan's hands curled into fists. So that's it. This is what you want your grandkids to remember. That you shut everyone out. That you left them nothing. I shook my head. I left them something better. A name they won't have to be ashamed of. Brendan's face twisted. He didn't expect that answer. You'll regret this, he said finally. You'll be alone. I already was. You just made it official. I turned, not giving them another second of my time. My footsteps echoed on the wooden stairs as I climbed, heart racing but head clear. Back in my room, I locked the door, sat at the desk, and opened the drawer where I had placed the original documents: foundation registration, tax records, press release drafts. The paperwork was real. The legacy was real. And it was mine. Minutes passed, then the sound of a car engine. I looked through the upstairs window just in time to see Brendan's SUV pulling away. Kayla sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. They didn't slam the door. They didn't throw a final insult. They just left. But they didn't know what came next. I reached for the envelope resting beside the paperwork, the one I had prepared a week earlier. It was addressed to the local paper. Inside was a statement. Not about revenge, not even about family. About a woman who rebuilt something from ashes and gave it away on her own terms. By Monday, the article would be live. By Tuesday, my inbox would be flooded with messages from other women, volunteers, donors, allies. By Christmas, the house would be quiet. But the phone would ring. And not because someone needed a check or a babysitter or a place to crash. This time, it would be someone asking how to help. I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I had no idea what Brendan and Kayla would do next. Maybe nothing. Maybe lawsuits. Maybe a long, bitter silence. But none of that mattered now. Because the story was already out of their hands. The legacy had moved beyond their control. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was living. There would be pain still. There would be grief. But they would not define me. They would not own me. The silence in the house was no longer cold. It was calm. A new kind of peace. And it would carry me into whatever came next, even if I had to walk the rest of the road alone. The morning sun pushed through the blinds like a gentle hand peeling back the final page of a long, difficult book. I stood in the kitchen with my hands wrapped around a warm mug, not out of habit, but because I wanted to feel something steady. The silence in the house no longer echoed. It settled. It belonged to me again. A week had passed since the meeting. Since the signatures, since Evelyn Marston Enterprises officially became the Marston Women's Foundation. The ink had barely dried, but the message was permanent. No one contested the change. Not Brendan, not Kayla, not their lawyer. The moment I revealed I had retained controlling interest, the air left the room like a balloon, popped mid-celebration. Brendan had folded his arms so tightly across his chest, I thought he'd crack a rib. Kayla had opened her mouth, but closed it again. No tears. No apologies. Just silence. The kind that weighs heavier than any scream. They never asked for a second meeting. On Tuesday, I received a certified letter from Brendan. 1 page. He relinquished all his prior demands. No further action. No attempt to regain control. He simply ended it. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. Yesterday, I drove by the community centre where the foundation would open its first program, a mentorship and housing initiative for older women rebuilding after family abandonment. The building was still in renovation, but I saw something there. Not scaffolding or tools or permits. I saw purpose, and I saw myself. Today, I decided to pack away the final boxes Brendan had left behind in the garage. Old notebooks from college, a trophy from a middle school spelling bee, a faded baseball cap he wore until the brim tore. I didn't open them, just closed each box one by one and stacked them in a corner. They were part of a version of him I no longer needed to carry. There was a knock on the door around noon. I opened it to find Martina. She didn't say anything at first, just held up a small brown paper bag with 2 sandwiches and a thermos. I stepped aside. We ate on the porch, no music, no agenda, just the crunch of bread and the breeze moving past us like an old friend returning home. She finally spoke after the last bite. Said she saw the press release, said she read the mission statement, said it sounded like something a woman who had been through hell and walked out smiling would write. I didn't smile then. I just breathed a little deeper. She handed me a folder before she left. Inside was a copy of the newspaper. Page 3. A small column titled, "Veteran Widow Redirects Family Legacy Toward Community Justice." Below it, a photo of me standing on the steps of the new foundation site. The reporter had caught me mid-sentence. My hand lifted, not in anger, not in defense, just lifted, like pointing towards something worth noticing. I closed the folder and placed it on the table. Then I stood, walked through the house. My house. No voices trailing behind me. No one watching. No one taking. Just me. I stepped into the sunroom and opened the windows. The wind carried in the scent of early fall, crisp, honest. It smelled like a fresh start. The phone rang in the distance. I let it ring twice before walking over. It was Ellen from the shelter. She told me the first woman had already arrived. 63, thrown out by her daughter-in-law. Slept in her car for 4 nights before someone gave her the flyer. Ellen said she cried when she saw a real bed. I said I'd come by tomorrow. Before she hung up, she said something else. Said the woman asked who started the foundation. When Ellen said my name, the woman looked down at her shoes and whispered, "Thank God she exists." I sat with that for a long while. It wasn't about revenge, not anymore. It was about becoming the kind of woman another woman might thank heaven for. That night, I walked out to the backyard, the stars blinking like distant answers. I thought of Robert, of the silence he left behind, of how I had filled it with doubt, then rage, then resolve. And now, finally, with peace. I didn't need an apology from Brendan. Not anymore. I didn't need him to see what he lost. I needed to see what I had found. My name, my power, my purpose. The wind rustled the trees above me. The old oak at the edge of the yard creaked softly. It had been here before the house was built. It would remain long after I was gone. I stood there a moment longer, my feet grounded, my breath steady, and then I turned back inside, because there were more women to help, more stories to rewrite, and mine had finally found its ending. If this story touched you, I hope you'll take a moment to reflect. Have you ever found strength after being overlooked or betrayed by those closest to you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your voice might help someone else heal, just like Evelyn found her own way back. And if you know a woman who's quietly carrying too much, send this story to her. She might not say it, but she'll feel seen.